Doesn't get any more real than that, does it? I want to thank Kathy again. Boy, anything after that's going to be disappointing, so I'm going to be disappointed today. I'm going to be brief. I knew Kathy was coming, and I wanted to allot her enough time, and so I'm going to be brief. Open your Bibles to John chapter 4. John chapter 4. I'm starting a new series today talking about relationships. And the reason I want to talk about relationships is because it just seems like the past 2.5, 3 years has been hard on our relationships, don't you think? With the pandemic, with the lockdowns, with all the political climate, all the division and hate, we are very much a divided people. We really are. It just seems like people have gone to their own side with their bent, with their slant, with their political views, and we're just yelling at each other from our side. We can't even get together and have meaningful conversations about things that we really need to talk about without people yelling and calling each other names. This is where we are. This is where we are. If you don't believe it, you're probably under a rock somewhere, which may not be a bad thing, right? Unfortunately, all of this has crept over into the church because the church is filled with people. There was a study that was started at the beginning of the pandemic, and it concluded about a month ago, and the results came out last week that showed that Christians are less likely to share the gospel with other people today, and the reason why is because we don't want to engage in relationships with people who are not like us. Because in order to share the gospel correctly, we have to establish relationships, don't we? I guess it's possible to go up to someone, spend about 30 seconds and say, hey, do you want to be saved? Then say this prayer and hope it turns out good for you. Hope to see you in heaven someday. I guess that's possible, but it's not likely. We have to engage people in relationships. We have to do better. And it just seems like that study showed that Christians have been pouting about all the social issues, and we have kind of retreated into our churches and said the heck with everybody else. This is wrong. This has to change. We have to engage people with relationships. Now, I say all of this because the gospel is all about relationships. Would you agree? You could say, well, Pastor, why don't you just stick with the Bible? Why don't you just stick with the gospel? Oh, I am. Because the gospel and the Bible are all about relationships. And let me say this, every relationship problem is a spiritual problem. Let me say that again. Every relationship problem is a spiritual problem. It doesn't matter what the relationship is. Your spouse, your kids, your co-workers, your boss, your neighbors. It doesn't matter. In the end, every relationship problem is a spiritual problem. Now, the problem that I see with us as Christians is we tend to compartmentalize our lives. Are you with me on that? Yeah, we have our church life, right? We have our church life, which is our life of faith. But we also have our life. And we never really even think how our faith is supposed to permeate our other lives, our home life, our school life, our work life. Let me say it this way. You call yourself a Christian, but Christian is not just part of who you are. It's everything you are. It can't be just one part of who you are. You can't say, I'm a Christian, but I'm also a father, I'm also a mother, I'm also a dad, I'm also a neighbor, I'm also an employee. No, it doesn't work that way. Christian is either everything you are, or it's absolutely nothing. So you can't call yourself a good Christian. Well, I guess you can. I guess you can call yourself a good Christian and believe that and even think that, but you can't call yourself a good Christian and be a bad husband, be a bad wife, be a bad neighbor. You can't. You can't call yourself a good Christian and have all of these bad relationships. You just can't. Now, the problem that I see, and this is, let me backtrack. This is what I keep trying to tell people, that what Christianity really is, because I really do believe that most people, I know the unbelieving world has a misconception of Christianity, but I think even a lot of Christians have a misconception of Christianity, don't you? I think a lot of Christians believe that Christianity is, okay, I embrace Jesus, and I don't have to go to hell. And I get to go to church every now and then, but other than that, I can live my own life. That's not the way it works at all. Christianity is either everything to you or it's absolutely nothing to you. So if you have a relationship problem, guess what? In the end, you have a Jesus problem. Now, I say all this because I'm a church person, right? Obviously, I'm a church person. Most of you are church people. You come to church on a regular basis, and you love your church, and so I know how we are. I've been a church person a long time. I had a drug problem when I was young. My family drugged me to church all the time. I mean, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I'm a church person, and I love the church. I absolutely love the church. And you're a church person, and I know how we are. You know how we are. When I say you, I'm not talking about you specifically, but I'm talking about church people. We know how we are. The world knows how we are. My goodness, church people, Christians are not necessarily more loving than unbelievers. Christians are not necessarily more kind than unbelievers. My goodness, you get us outside this building and often we are undistinguishable from the rest of the world. That is a fact. And it's still puzzling to me how the Christian divorce rate is almost identical to the non-Christian divorce rate. Do you know what that means? That means most of the Christians who are married, or professing Christians who are married, their faith has very, very, very little to do with their marriage. And this is wrong. This is completely wrong. And let's just talk about church people for a second. How many of you have been in church for over 20 years? Raise your hand. Yeah, me too. And I've met some humdingers in the church, haven't you? I mean, I've met some people in the church where you just scratch your head and like, my goodness. I've seen pastors that were basically dictators, where everybody was scared to death of them. Have you seen that? You didn't want to say anything to the pastor because you were afraid he was going to explode. I had a pastor, I think I was like 8, 9, 10 years old or something like that. And I was scared to death of this guy. I really was. That's wrong. It doesn't need to be that way. That is wrong. I've seen people jump from church to church to church because it's easier to change churches than it is to forgive someone or get along. I've seen people go to large churches on purpose because they have all these different services. So if you don't like the person at 8 o'clock, just go to the 9:30. If you don't like the people in the 9:30 that you can't get along with or won't forgive, you just go to the 11. I've seen people use the church to get what they want. They're taking advantage of people's good heart. This is wrong. We have to do better than this. We have to be different. This is wrong. So for the next couple weeks, 3 weeks, I want to talk about relationships, okay? Today is just a brief introduction, but I want us to look at our own relationships. I want us to look at our own hearts and examine those relationships by what we learn from Jesus, okay? So let's look at John chapter 4, starting in verse 1. It says this. I'm reading from the New Living Translation, but you follow along with whatever translation you may have. Jesus knew the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John, though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go through Samaria on the way. Now stop there just for a second. He didn't have to go through Samaria. He really didn't. In fact, Jews always avoided Samaria. Okay, so if they were going somewhere and Samaria was the quickest way, they didn't go that way. But in a sense, he did have to go through Samaria. All right? He had to go through Samaria on the way. Eventually, he came to a Samaritan village of Sychar near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from his long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Soon a Samaritan woman came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Please give me a drink." He was alone at the time because his disciples had gone into the village to buy some food. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. She said to Jesus, "You are a Jew, and I'm a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Jesus replied, "If you only knew the gift God has for you and who you are speaking to, you would ask me, and I would give you living water." Now, what's her response? Somebody tell me. You can talk. What's her response to Jesus? Her response is, okay, Jesus is a Jew, a Jewish man. She is a Samaritan woman. So she assumes what? She assumes they have nothing to talk about. That's what she assumes. They have nothing to talk about. She knows who she is, or she thinks she does. Actually, you can't know yourself until you know Christ. But she knows herself, and she thinks she knows enough about Jesus to know that they have absolutely nothing to talk about. They shouldn't even start this conversation. Now, something that you need to know, a little history here, that men in that culture, men did not talk to women in public. Okay, this was not just some people, old traditional people. This is the way it was. Men did not talk to women in public unless it was your mother or daughter or something like that. That's the way it was. Men did not talk to women in public. Also, the Jews hated the Samaritans. They loathed the Samaritans. This goes all the way back to the end of the Old Testament and through the intertestamental period. They hated each other. Jews hated Samaritans. In return, the Samaritans resented that and hated them back. Have you ever noticed that's usually the way it works? When someone hates you, after a while you start doing what? You start hating them back. And so that's the way it was. And so number one, Jesus is talking to a woman in public. That's bad enough. Number two, he's talking to a Samaritan woman. And number three, he's talking to a certain kind of woman. You know what I'm talking about? What am I talking about? She slept around. Yeah. Now, I've actually seen some clips of movies kind of downplaying that, but she did. She slept around. She'd had 5 husbands. The guy that she had back at her house wasn't even her husband, probably even wasn't her boyfriend. She probably picked him up the night before. And so Jesus has all this going against him. And so the question I have is, why in the world is he talking to her? Why is he talking to her? Why is he risking his reputation? Because he was a rabbi. He was a teacher. Remember, his disciples were really, really surprised when they came back. Why? Because you don't do that. Why is he talking to her? Well, first of all, he wants to change her. He wants to change her. And he knows that there's something keeping her from living the life that Christ has for her, namely her past. Her past. Let's start verse 11 again. "But sir, you don't have a rope or a bucket," she said, "and this well is very deep. Where would you get this living water? And besides, do you think you're greater than our ancestor Jacob?" I kind of like that, don't you? Yeah, he's a lot greater. "Who gave us this well? How can you offer better water than he and his sons and his animals enjoyed?" Jesus replied, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I will give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Please, sir, the woman said, give me this water, then I'll never be thirsty again, and I won't have to come here to get water. Now, what's the next verse say? What's he say to her? Go get your husband. Stop there. Go get your husband. Now, when I read this, it kind of sounds mean, doesn't it? I mean, seriously. It kind of sounds mean. Is he trying to embarrass her? Is he just being mean? Because you have to understand, this is this woman's biggest wound. It really is. Everybody knows how she is. This is her biggest wound. It's like a wound on the outside of her skin, and it just seems like Jesus grabs that wound and squeezes, doesn't it? Well, so what's he doing? Why did he bring up her past? And if you'll notice, throughout the rest of the story, he doesn't bring it up again. But this is how Jesus starts out. Go get your husband. Why does he do that? You guys are dead this morning, you know it? Why does he do that? Yeah? He does it because Jesus knows in order for her to go forward, in order for her to have a future, you have to deal with your past. You really have to deal with your past. And Jesus knows this. Jesus knows everything about this woman, right? He knows her past, he knows her present, and he knows what she needs. But the first thing that she has to do to have healthy relationships, even with Jesus, is she has to deal with her past. Our past shapes us, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. Our past shapes us. Did you know that psychiatrists and psychiatrists say that the number one reason why people have bad relationships is because of what? Something in their past. Something in their past, it really shapes us. People act on what they went through when they were younger, right? They really do. Watching mom and dad, how they deal with money, how they deal with anger. Did you know that most abusers today were once abused? Most orphans have trust issues, right? You have to understand, before we can even have healthy Christ-like relationships, we have to deal with our past. Our relationships today, the degree in which we have them, a lot of it's based on our past. Did you know that? So what Jesus is doing is he's getting her to look at her past so that she can have a healthy future. What's in your past that's keeping you from having healthy relationships? What's in your past that is shaping how you deal with people today? Not too many people know this. Only Jennifer and a couple other people. But when I was young, I was taken advantage of. It was a friend of the family. Nobody knew anything about it. I never did say anything about it. And once that person left, it's almost like your mind kind of shuts all that out. You know what I'm talking about? The mind is a really funny thing. And so later on, it was almost like it didn't happen. For years and years, I had these bad nightmares. I would get up in the middle of the night and run around and scream and everything. It just felt like, I was falling. Eventually, that went away. That went away, and I never thought anything about it. It was like it didn't happen. But about 20 years ago, all those memories started coming back, and I got very angry. I was like, did this really happen? Jennifer remembers it well. I got very angry. I got very angry with God. I'm still coming to grips with it. All that shapes you. It has very much shaped my relationships with people. I don't get close to people. A lot of you may know that. I really don't. The only person that I'm really close to is Jennifer. And there's a reason why, because those things shape you. Your past shapes your relationships today. What's in your past that's shaping your relationship today? Why can't you be close to people? Why can't you forgive people? Why can't you trust people? In order for us to have healthy relationships, Christ-like relationships, we have to deal with our past. And I tell you this, not for you to feel sorry for me, because it's not a contest of whose story is the worst, okay? We all have things in our past. We all had things happen to us. In this woman's case, my goodness, it was her fault, right? I mean, it was her sins. Someone didn't sin against her. It was her sins. And a lot of the things that we go through with, the consequences that we're dealing with now, are because of our own sins, right? But we have to deal with them. We have to give them over to Jesus. And I want you to see how this woman responded. Go to verse 25. No, go to verse 34. Go to verse 34. You know this story, right? You know what happens. Then Jesus explained, my nourishment comes from him who does the will of God who sent me, and from finishing his work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people brought to eternal life. What joy awaits both the planter and the one who plants. The one who plants and another harvest, and it is true. I sent you to harvest where you did not plant, and others had already done the work, and now you will get together the harvest. Hold on one second. I've lost my place. Hold on. That's not what I wanted to read, but what I want, you know the story. I can't find it in here. The story is, after she has this encounter with Jesus, she goes back to the village where she was at, and she says what? What does she say? She says, come see a man who told me all about my past. I find that funny because you know the people were like, well, of course everybody knows your past, right? Does she have herself another man? Right? Of course. But you see, after her encounter with Jesus, she wasn't ashamed of her past anymore, was she? Because she gave it to Jesus. In order for us to have healthy relationships, we really have to deal with our past. Starting next week, we're going to look at our own relationships and see how we can do better with them. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you